What's up, everybody? This is Johnny Basement, and we're back here in the basement going further and further down the rabbit hole that is cricket. Before we even get into Sir Don Bradman's life, please subscribe, hit the bell notice, hit the like button, drop your comments down below, where you'll find the link to this video as well down below. Now, just like when I got into footy, I started going over some famous players of today and yesterday, like Lee Matthews and Dusty Martin, Buddy Franklin, people like that. Now we've done Virat Kohli here, Shane Warne, we've done him, and now we're getting to Sir Don Bradman's life. Instead of looking at highlights and videos, this was a different aspect. Instead, because I usually, there's guys that have been following me down my footy journey, you guys know I take a lot of notes. And instead of taking notes, I figured right here it has Sir Don Bradman's life. So why don't we take a look at this video here, see what he was all about, and as we get into this legend, which I'm told is like the GOAT, it's like the Babe Ruth of cricket. And by the way, this is a side note just for a minute. I wear a lot of Iron Maiden t-shirts when I do some videos here. I had a couple of people in the comments over the course of these past few videos talking about how Metallica is way better than Iron Maiden. No. I grew up with all of this stuff, and I love Metallica. I love old Metallica. All right, way better than new Metallica. Okay, they are legends. They are masters, no doubt. But they are been handed the #1 GOAT of metal, which is not true. It's right here, and that's all I got to say on that. Enough said on that. They should have kept Dave Mustaine. It would have been a whole different story for them. Kirk Hammett is nice on the guitar for Metallica, but Dave Mustaine should have stayed with the band. Anyway, let's get into this. These are the GOATs right here, and apparently Sir Don Bradman, it was like the Babe Ruth of cricket. Let's get into his life.
Australia's first true sporting hero was the immortal Victor Trumper, one of the great batsmen of cricket's golden age. Trumper's untimely death at the age of 37 from kidney disease in June 1915 was headline news in papers across Australia and in England. On the other side of the world, the young nation was facing its baptism of fire in the trenches of Gallipoli.
I did a couple pieces on Anzac Day. That is some story behind the Gallipoli. That is some story. Anzac Day is real. I did videos on that. I'll be doing more again come Anzac Day game this coming April.
The heroism of the Australian soldiers gave birth to the Anzac legend. Australia needed new heroes, and they were to find one in the most unlikely of places. In the New South Wales country town of Bowral, there was a young boy who was destined to become Australia's first truly international and greatest sporting hero. His name was Donald George Bradman. The young Bradman spent hours honing his hand-eye coordination by hitting a golf ball with a cricket stump against the tank stand at the back of the family home in Bowral.
Yeah, hitting a golf ball up against a tank stand with a cricket stump is near impossible. I think I've tried it a couple of times and maybe at 2 in a row, that was the best. But seeing Sir Donald Bradman on that footage hit 3 or 4, that's pretty amazing. I would have liked to have seen whether he carried on and got 5 or 10, but I'm sure he would have had to miss it at some stage to prove that he was human.
That's cool. Now, you guys have heard me bring up Mariano Rivera quite often. If you look at his documentary, he made gloves out of milk cartons, because they were so poor they couldn't afford gloves. Can you imagine that? The greatest closer in American baseball history. Closer, literally what it is. He comes in to close out the game. You got a 1-run lead, you want that guy on your mound. He grew up with a a milk carton. They made him into gloves and they threw rocks and things like that, and that's how he learned. That's crazy. This man doing what he did against the stump, apparently, look at that. That's a player right there saying it's crazy. Hand-eye coordination is what it's all about in these sports.
The idea that he came from the country, from nowhere, the bush, the frontier, and came into the city, to Sydney, made his name and took on the world in a way that no one had ever sort of even thought of before, is what brings the Bradman story so much into people's imaginations and people's hearts.
To be a great batsman, timing is everything. Exactly the same can be said about the birth of the Bradman legend. Don Bradman's rise to prominence coincided with major advances in communications. Newspaper circulation, both in Australia and overseas, was growing. The first talking picture was in 1927, Newsreels at local cinemas were coming into vogue, and of course there was the enormous popularity of the radio. 1930 was the year that Bradman's batting talent began to gain international prominence. In January of that year, 21-year-old Don Bradman scored a phenomenal 452 not out in the amazing time of just 415 minutes. It remains the highest individual score by a first-class cricketer in Australia.
Was that in one game? Was that in one game? Wow.
Where are the Australian team, captained by Mr. Woodford, going out the field?
That couldn't have been in one game, right? I'm too new to this to know, so let me know.
This is the first match of their prep.
Bradman's remarkable batting feats on the 1930 tour of England would elevate him to unprecedented heights of hero status and celebrity. In the opening match of the tour at Worcester, in his first innings on English soil on the 1st of May, Bradman scored 236. By the end of May, Bradman had already scored a colossal tally of 1,000 runs. Bradman scored a record 974 runs at an average of 139.14, including a century, 2 double centuries, and a triple century. But Bradman extracted his revenge on Walter Robbins and the other England bowlers in...
So if he had over 1,000 in 1 month, and that 400 had to have been in the game, if he's averaging 139.1, that has to be per game, right? Per match, it has to be. Wow, that's amazing. From the little bit that I've looked up so far, that's pretty incredible.
The second test at Lords, when he scored a faultless 254.
England have never won a test on this ground yet. But it doesn't look like they're going to win this one the way Bradman is batting. Every time he scores something, hardly a ball gone in this over it he hasn't scored from. Bradman's 199. That's his 200. Well done.
In the third test at Headingley, Bradman scored 309 in a single day, on his way to a then record score of 334.
How are you enjoying your trip to England?
Oh, having a great time, thanks.
That's the idea.
We're just having a wonderful time. The people are treating us so well that we're wondering we don't like going back home hardly enough. It's a wonderful time. But we find we're having a good deal of trouble with the weather. I don't think it's been a good summer. It's been dull, rainy most of the time. In fact, we've only had about 1 decent month all the time we've been here. And that was about the second month after we arrived. Then, of course, with the dull weather, it makes cricket much harder. We're used to a very bright light, middle of summer, the hot weather. And when you get on these dull conditions, it makes it very awkward for you to see the ball.
One of the many...
And I try and get as many runs as I possibly can. And if in getting those runs I should happen to break any record, well, naturally, I'm very pleased, but I do not deliberately set out to try and break records.
Don Bradman finished the 1930 tour with a record total of 2,960 runs at an average of 98.66.
Now, do these records still stand today? A lot of them, do they still stand today? Because, you know, as we, being sports fans that we are, we always like to compare and reach back. Well, you know, Babe Ruth, for instance, in baseball, well, he wouldn't have been able to hit the pitching of today, and he played in an era where the talent wasn't the same as it is today. Could he be able to hit, you know, Greg Maddux or Roger Clemens in his day, or would he be able to hit a Jacob deGrom? Could he do that? I mean, we don't know. These are questions that can never be answered. So to call someone a GOAT of the entire sport of all time, I think also in all sports, takes away from the athleticism that we're seeing today. Like, oh, Michael Jordan, no doubt, is better than LeBron James. Is he? Is he? People say it just because they're used to saying it. How come Kareem Abdul-Jabbar can't be in that category? Because he won 6 rings as well, and he did it with 2 different teams, the Milwaukee Bucks and the Lakers. So it's hard. It takes away from the athleticism of today to say that one guy from way back was the GOAT of all time. Maybe he's the first to do so many things that no one's seen before. And if the records haven't been broken, is it because the bowlers have been better? Like, was there a Shane Warne bowling back then? Was there a bowler like Shane Warne? Could this guy hit Shane Warne? Doesn't seem like many could. So I'm just saying, throwing that out there because I'm diehard with all the sports that I watch. You guys have seen different angles of my basement here. So that's my thoughts on when everybody talks about the GOAT and the GOAT. Different eras face different trials, if you will.
Cricket lovers in England had never seen the like of him before, and Bradman soon became idolised by thousands of young boys throughout the country.
Sir Don Bradman, what a welcome waits for you back home.
That's a far cry from Iron Maiden, is it not?
Don Bradman returned from the 1930 tour of England a national hero. Much to the chagrin of many of the other players, Bradman was picked up in Perth and flown ahead of the rest of the team and feted at a series of public and civic receptions.
The offer I received to go to England was a very good one. At the same time, I felt that I would like to remain in Australia if it was possible for me to do so. 3 prominent Australian business concerns made me a combined offer of a contract to remain here, which I accepted in preference to going home to the old country.
If you wind it,
I wonder how much that contract was for. Like, did you, like today, Shohei Ohtani got 10 years, $700 million from the Los Angeles Dodgers. Can you believe that? $700 million over 10 years. Wow.
back to...
In fact, he...
Was Don Bradman's dominance over the game of cricket, it was inevitable that opponents would begin to devise methods to try and curb his prolific scoring. The tactics used by England captain Douglas Jardine during the infamous 1932-33 Bodyline series succeeded to the extent that Bradman's phenomenal batting average was reduced to a still very respectable 56.57. Although many of the Australian batsmen were struck and suffered injuries, most notably captain Bill Woodfull and wicketkeeper Bert Oldfield, Bradman's superior footwork and agility saw him escape injury. However, his ploy of often stepping back to the leg side to enable more scoring opportunities opened him up to accusations of not standing up to Bodyline. Taking measures to curb someone's total dominance of a particular sport was not just reserved for Don Bradman. There was another Australian sporting hero in the 1930s whose total dominance of his sport prompted a change in the rules.
Isn't that funny? The head coach of the New York Jets said, if you ain't got haters, you ain't popping. It's true. If people have to change things and then degrade what you do, LeBron James is a major example of people that hate on him. Hate on him. Because the guy is so talented that he's been the closest threat to a Michael Jordan status. So we got to hate on them and act as if they're nothing. If they're getting that much hate, then that's how great they are. That much hate means they're that great. Period.
The measure of his determination and his perfectionism is that he played billiards against the world's best, Walter Lindrum, who wiped the table before Don could even play a stroke. So he practiced and he practiced and he practiced. And when he had a return game against Lindrum, he said, well, it's only fair that I break. And he broke. And he's sank every ball for 147, and I just can't imagine a look on Lindrum's face. It's terrifying that a man can be that good by choice when he sets his heart to it.
He was good at anything he really took up, like he was a good classic pianist, he was a good billiard player, he was a good golfer, and he didn't pretend he was good. You didn't know he was good. He didn't tell you. He was that type of bloke.
I like that. He didn't tell you. There's a great quote from the greatest running back of all time in football, and that's mine in the NFL, Walter Payton. He said, if you're good, you'll let people know about it. If you're great, they'll tell you.
Mrs. Bradman, followed by Don, leaves her hotel en route to catch the boat train at Victoria on their way back to Australia. It will be remembered that Mrs. Bradman rushed to England when her husband's health gave cause for anxiety after his operation for appendicitis. Now he is fit and cheery once more, but inclined to be reticent when questioned as to how soon he expects to be playing cricket again.
In 1934, on the tour of England, he wasn't quite himself. He was still making runs fairly plentifully, and when he made 304 in the Leeds test, everyone said, well, he's okay. But after the Oval test, where he made only 244, things went wrong. He suddenly collapsed with peritonitis, and he was at one moment given up for dead.
In those days, you normally didn't recover from peritonitis. So everybody assumed that he was going to die. And when a great cricketer, or great anybody, great personality, if you like, is going to die, I mean, let's take David Beckham as an example. If Beckham were to keel over tomorrow with peritonitis and we look at him dying, it'd be the same thing. The front page.
This guy looks like Alfred Hitchcock, man. Sorry, that's what I thought the first minute I saw him.
News everywhere, and in those days, of course, it was the same with Bradman. And the King wanted to know all about it, and people gave blood, and people stood outside the hospital.
Message was got to his wife in faraway Adelaide, or Sydney then, and you couldn't get to England in a hurry. The offer was to fly her part of the way and then go by ship. She must have been a very, very worried woman. She sent out a brave message, though, "I'm coming, Don," and that must have cheered him up during his periods of consciousness. But he was nearly lost. Sir Douglas Shields, the Australian surgeon, helped to save his life, and Jessie got to England to find him looking quite well, but it was a very near thing, and they convalesced. King George had shown concern, perhaps not just because he admired him as a cricketer, he'd shaken his hand at Lord's, but he reasoned that Don Bradman was a pretty important ingredient in the Empire picture. England was proud of him too, in a weird sort of way.
Don?
I love sports documentaries. This is an incredible story. I'm glad I chose this. This is an incredible story about a man. You always want to see behind the scenes, besides just big hits and big plays and records. You get to see who the people are, what makes them legends. Like he said, he wasn't shaking his hand just because he's a great cricketer. It's the person, the man, his aura. That's what made him really shake his hand. It's the person Sir Don Bradman is that made him want to meet him, not just being great at your sport. That's what legends are made of.
And Jessie Bradman's love match was both a long and enduring partnership.
It was the most extraordinary and happy marriage. Jessie was the only person who could contradict him, who could say, "Come on, Don, you don't mean that, do you, Don?" And he would accept that. He wouldn't accept it from anybody else. But I think that partnership was really quite extraordinary. You don't see marriages like that often.
When he found Jessie, when they were kids, I suppose that was the most important ingredient in his long life, because she was there almost all the way, and she must have been the most tremendous support and comfort to him.
This was an incredible, incredible documentary. This is the way it's got to go sometimes, especially when you're learning about the game's greats and you go back in time, you go back in history before you learn the ins and the outs of the game itself and who's great today. Going back in time and looking over. I still do it I love being documentary and a historian in basketball, hockey, football, baseball. Those are my sports. I love it. I love seeing the history of these games, where they came from, what I grew up with. And this here, you guys grew up with this stuff, so you know a lot more than I do, a lot more names than I do. But this here is absolutely amazing. This was a great story of knowing not just the great cricketer, but the man himself. This is what legends are all about. And that's why my favorite player of any sport was Walter Payton. That man is a legend in many, many aspects of life besides being the greatest running back of all time. Guys, this was incredible. Incredible. Thank you so much for mentioning this guy's name, Sir Don Bradman. I really appreciate all the support of the channel and going down the cricket rabbit hole. Yes, Footy fans, we're going to get back into some stuff and see what the Brisbane Lions have been doing, what the Collingwood Magpies have been doing, the Hawthorn Hawks, so they're going to be able to start coming back. We're going to get into a lot of that. The Carlton Blues, we're going to see what's been going on during the offseason. We're going to do some reviews of those games as well, but I'm enjoying learning this new game also, and the people that said I should look into rugby, we're going to be doing some of that as well. Subscribe, bell notice, like button. Drop your comments down below, as well as you find the link to this video down below. I'm Johnny Basement, and I am out.